My name is Laura. I'm 34 years old, and for 3 years I lived in a narcissist relationship that nearly destroyed everything I believed about myself. For 3 years, I was trapped by a narcissist who made me question my sanity, my worth, and even my ability to love. This is my narcissist true story, my narcissist confession. And sometimes I still tremble when I speak the words out loud, because the wounds of narcissist abuse don't vanish when the relationship ends. They follow you like shadows, and you carry them in your body, in your heart, in your silence. The first weeks felt confusing, but I ignored the discomfort because I thought I was the problem. He didn't scream. He didn't hit. His violence came in whispers, in twisted words, in the way he looked at me with cold amusement when I tried to explain myself. It was emotional abuse disguised as love, psychological abuse that no one else could see. If I smiled too brightly, he said I was showing off. If I spoke too softly, he accused me of trying to manipulate him. If I stayed quiet, he would sulk for hours and punish me with silence. Soon, I realized I was shrinking, becoming smaller and smaller inside this toxic relationship. The first invisible violences were so subtle, I almost didn't notice. He criticized the way I dressed, but in the tone of caring advice. He told me, "You look desperate when you wear that color." When I cooked dinner, he said, "It's fine, but my ex used to do it better." Those words pierced deeper than I admitted at the time. This was the start of narcissist control. Little hooks placed inside my mind until I stopped trusting my own choices. He claimed I was too sensitive, too dramatic, that I made problems out of nothing. Slowly, I learned to doubt myself. This was the beginning of the invisible prison, the quiet cage of narcissist manipulation. The gaslighting came like waves I couldn't resist. When I found lipstick on his shirt, he laughed and said it was mine. When I confronted him about messages on his phone, he twisted it back on me. "Why are you invading my privacy? Only someone guilty would snoop." My reality bent until I felt dizzy. He could lie to my face, betray me with another woman, and then convince me I was imagining things. It was a classic gaslighting story, but at the time, it felt like I was losing my mind. I started apologizing for things I hadn't done, begging him to forgive me for pain he had caused. That's the cruelty of narcissist manipulation. You end up begging the abuser to stop hurting you while believing you deserve it. The escalation of abuse broke me in ways I still can't put into full words. He humiliated me in public, making jokes at my expense during dinners with friends. He would say things like, "Don't take her seriously, she's always confused." People laughed, and I laughed too, pretending it didn't kill me inside. On my birthday, he disappeared for hours and returned with the smell of perfume that wasn't mine. When I asked him where he had been, he sneered, "You don't deserve to celebrate. You should be grateful I even came back." That night I cried until my eyes swelled, but in the morning he acted as if nothing had happened. Lies and betrayal became my normal. Control, humiliation, and psychological abuse became the air I breathed. I stayed, though, and I hate myself for how long I stayed. Why? Because he convinced me no one else would ever want me. He said, "You're damaged goods, Laura. Without me, you're nothing." Those words became chains around my soul. Fear and shame kept me there, and the twisted hope that maybe, just maybe, if I loved him enough, he would change. That is the invisible prison of narcissist isolation. You stay not because you're weak, but because the manipulation has cut you so deep you believe escape is impossible. I distanced myself from friends, from family, until all I had was him and his cruelty. Sometimes I wonder why I didn't scream, why I didn't run sooner. But the truth is, living with a narcissist is not simple. It's trauma. It's fear. It's shame that silences your voice. It's believing the toxic love is all you deserve. My narcissist relationship story is not one of sudden freedom. It is one of slow survival, one of crawling through an emotional abuse story that nearly broke me. He only loved me when I was broken. He only stayed when I was small. And now, as I sit here speaking these words, I realize he never loved me at all. He loved the control, the humiliation, the manipulation. He loved watching me drown. But I don't want to be broken anymore. I don't want my life defined by narcissist abuse. This is not a happy ending, because healing from trauma is not linear, and the scars remain. But it is a confession, a suspension in time where I admit the truth. I was trapped by a narcissist, but I am slowly learning that survival is also a form of rebellion. I think the hardest part of living with a narcissist is how invisible the wounds are. If I had bruises on my body, people would have noticed. But with psychological abuse, with gaslighting and manipulation, you become a prisoner inside your own mind. Friends asked me why I looked tired, why I had lost weight, why I barely smiled anymore. I invented excuses. Work is stressful. I'm just not sleeping well. The truth was that I was suffocating under narcissist control, trapped in a toxic love that consumed me from the inside out. He isolated me little by little. At first, it was subtle. He complained every time I wanted to see my friends. He would say, "Why do you need them when you have me?" Or, "They're jealous of us. They'll poison your mind." Then he started criticizing my family, planting seeds of doubt. "Your mother doesn't really care about you. She just wants to control you." The result was narcissist isolation. I stopped visiting my parents. I stopped answering texts from old friends. I was alone in the world, and he was the center of my universe. A universe built on lies and betrayal. The manipulation was endless. If I cried, he said I was unstable. If I didn't cry, he said I was cold. If I raised my voice, I was hysterical. If I stayed quiet, I was passive-aggressive. There was no version of me that was acceptable. This constant shifting of blame was another form of narcissist abuse. I remember once, after he disappeared for 2 days without explanation, I confronted him when he returned. He looked at me with disgust and said, "You're so paranoid, Laura. No man could live with someone as insecure as you." And I believed him. I believed I was paranoid, insecure, unworthy of love. That is what narcissist manipulation does. It takes your reality, rips it apart, and replaces it with his version of the truth. The gaslighting story became more twisted as time went by. He left his phone on the bed once, and I saw a message pop up from another woman. My chest froze. When I asked about it, he smiled like I was a child and said, "That's my cousin, you idiot. Do you really think anyone else would want me?" That sentence shattered me. I felt both betrayed and ridiculous at the same time. He had betrayed me, but he had also convinced me that even in betrayal, I was the fool. Living with a narcissist meant living in constant confusion, never knowing what was real and what was manipulation. The escalation of humiliation became unbearable. At a party with his coworkers, he introduced me as the one who cries all the time. People laughed. I wanted to disappear. Another night, when I had prepared a special dinner, he invited a friend without telling me. When I looked upset, he hissed in my ear, "Don't embarrass me in front of people, you worthless girl." The friend smiled politely, unaware of the storm inside me. Those are the moments of psychological abuse that cut deeper than any slap ever could. They are invisible, but they destroy you piece by piece. Still, I stayed. I stayed because of fear and shame. Fear that no one else would want me. Shame that if I left, everyone would see how broken I had become. And a small, desperate hope that maybe he would change. That's the prison of a toxic relationship. You start telling yourself stories. He's just stressed. He didn't mean it. If I love him enough, he will love me back. But the truth is, narcissist love is not love at all. It is control, manipulation, humiliation, and power. I remember one night that changed everything inside me. He came home late, drunk, and I asked softly, "Where were you?" He looked at me with those empty eyes and said, "I was with someone who actually appreciates me." Then he laughed, turned off the lights, and fell asleep. I lay next to him, trembling, realizing that my life had become a nightmare. I was trapped by a narcissist, suffocating under emotional abuse, and I didn't even recognize myself anymore. But even then, I didn't leave. I couldn't. The trauma bond was too strong. I felt addicted to the cycle. The cruelty, followed by rare moments of affection. The toxic love kept me tied, even when I knew I was dying inside. That is the invisible prison survivors rarely talk about. The chains are not physical, but they feel just as unbreakable. Sometimes I still hear his voice in my head. You're nothing without me. You're too sensitive. No one else will ever love you. Those words became scars etched into my mind. They were his weapons, sharper than knives, designed to keep me small. And the worst part is, for a long time, I believed every word. That is the lasting damage of narcissist abuse. Now, looking back, I see how systematic it all was. The lies and betrayal, the isolation, the humiliation. It was a pattern, a cycle of abuse that I couldn't escape. He didn't love me. He loved the control, the power, the destruction of my spirit. Living with a narcissist was like drowning in slow motion. You know you're underwater, you know you're dying, but you can't fight your way to the surface. And yet, I survived. Not because he let me, but because somewhere deep inside, a part of me refused to die. A part of me whispered, "You deserve more." That whisper grew slowly until I started to believe it. And maybe that's where my strength lies now. Not in forgetting, not in erasing the trauma, but in remembering and still choosing to breathe. I remember how my mornings started to feel like punishments. Waking up next to him was like waking up inside a nightmare I couldn't escape. He would roll over, look at me, and instead of "good morning," I'd get, "You look tired. No wonder people don't take you seriously." That was his way of beginning the day, with humiliation disguised as casual comments. And because I was already living inside an invisible prison of narcissist control, I swallowed those words as if they were truth. Breakfast became another battlefield. If I made coffee, he complained it was too strong. If I didn't make coffee, he accused me of being lazy. Once, when I set the table and forgot to bring sugar, he said, "See? You can't even handle the basics. How could I ever trust you with anything bigger?" His criticisms chipped away at me until I believed I was incompetent, useless. That's the cruelty of psychological abuse. It makes you redefine yourself according to the abuser's voice. My own inner voice was drowned by his endless accusations. There were nights when I begged for clarity. I remember one evening, I asked him softly, "Do you even love me?" He looked at me with a smirk and said, "I love the idea of you, but the real you? She's weak." That sentence shattered me in ways I cannot fully explain. Love was supposed to be safety, but living with a narcissist turned love into torture. It became toxic love, a love that suffocates, manipulates, and leaves you empty. The gaslighting deepened until I lost all sense of reality. Once, I found hotel receipts in his jacket pocket. When I confronted him, he laughed coldly. "You put that there? You're crazy, Laura. You invent things just to make me look bad." And I doubted myself. I actually wondered if I had put the receipt there without realizing it. That's what narcissist manipulation does. It twists your perception until you cannot trust your own memory. It was an endless gaslighting story, and I was drowning in confusion. Sometimes he used silence as a weapon. He wouldn't speak to me for days, ignoring my presence as if I were invisible. I would try everything, cooking his favorite meal, apologizing for things I didn't do, crying quietly next to him, but he remained cold, distant, punishing me with absence. Then, suddenly, he'd decide to forgive me, without ever explaining what I had done wrong. That cycle of punishment and false forgiveness was another layer of narcissist control. It trained me to behave like a prisoner desperate to please her captor. One of the worst humiliations happened at a family gathering. In front of everyone, he joked, "Laura needs instructions for everything. She can't even choose shoes without asking me." Everyone laughed, including my relatives, not knowing how much it destroyed me inside. After the party, when I cried in the bathroom, he whispered through the door, "You're pathetic. No one respects you. That's why you need me." Those words burned like fire, and I believed them. That's the devastation of emotional abuse. You start to live your life through the lens of the abuser's lies. I stayed because I was terrified of leaving. Fear and shame chained me to him. Fear that he would punish me if I tried to escape. Shame that people would say, "Why did she let it go so far?" I stayed because I thought toxic love was better than no love at all. and I stayed because he convinced me that without him, I was nothing. That was the invisible prison of narcissist isolation. Nights were the worst. I would lie in bed, listening to his breathing, and wonder how someone could sleep so peacefully after destroying me. My heart would race, my body tense, waiting for the next storm. Sometimes I thought about packing a bag and running away, but then his words echoed in my head. "You'll never survive on your own. You need me." And I stayed. I stayed even though every fiber of my being screamed for freedom. Looking back, I realize how strategic it all was. The lies and betrayal weren't accidents. They were tools. The manipulation wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate. Every insult, every humiliation, every moment of control was designed to break me. Living with a narcissist isn't about love, it's about power. And he had all the power. One night, after another fight, I stood in front of the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. My eyes were empty. My face was pale. My smile was gone. I whispered to myself, "Who are you?" That was the moment I realized I had lost myself completely inside this toxic relationship. I wasn't Laura anymore. I was just his shadow, molded by his control, defined by his cruelty. And still, I couldn't leave. That's the paradox of narcissist abuse. You know you're dying inside, but you stay because the prison feels safer than the unknown. Trauma, fear, shame, they weave together into chains that are invisible but unbreakable. And every day, those chains got tighter. I don't know when the exact breaking point came. Maybe it was the night he told me, "Even your family doesn't care about you. That's why they don't call." Maybe it was when he disappeared for a weekend and came back smelling of another woman's perfume, laughing at my tears. Or maybe it was simply the slow erosion of my soul, until there was almost nothing left of me. What I do know is this: he thrived on my destruction. He fed on my pain. He only loved me when I was broken, and I gave him exactly what he wanted because I didn't know how to escape. That's the truth of my narcissist confession. There is a kind of silence that screams louder than words. Living with him meant existing inside that silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. I learned to read his moods like weather patterns. The sharp narrowing of his eyes, the way his jaw tightened, the way he slammed doors just hard enough to make me flinch. Those small signs told me whether I would face another night of insults, another round of emotional abuse, or another cold wall of silence that lasted for days. He had a talent for timing his cruelty. On the days I felt strong, when I thought maybe I could walk away, he would suddenly be kind. He would bring flowers, touch my face softly, whisper, "You're my everything." My heart would break with relief, and I would believe him again. That cycle, cruelty followed by false tenderness, kept me chained to him. It was a toxic love, a twisted game of hope and despair. And every time I hoped, he betrayed me again. The lies and betrayal became endless. I once found a necklace in his drawer, clearly not mine. When I asked, he smirked and said, "You're losing it, Laura. That's a gift for you. But you ruined the surprise." My stomach turned, but I swallowed my doubt. Days later, I never saw that necklace again. When I asked, he snapped, "Stop inventing things. You're sick." That's the essence of a gaslighting story. He could lie to my face, erase evidence, and still convince me that I was the unstable one. The humiliation escalated into new levels of cruelty. At dinner with friends, he announced, "Laura is so emotional. I can't have a serious conversation with her. She cries about everything." Everyone laughed nervously, not knowing how deeply those words cut. Later, when I tried to express how much it hurt, he rolled his eyes and said, "God, you're so sensitive. Learn to take a joke." That's how psychological abuse works. It disguises cruelty as humor, making the victim doubt their right to feel pain. Isolation became total. He convinced me that my family was toxic, that my friends envied me, that the world outside our apartment was full of people who wanted to see me fail. "I'm the only one who really loves you," he whispered, while simultaneously destroying me. That is the trap of narcissist isolation. You're left with no one but the abuser. And when you cry for help, There's no one left to hear you. I remember one specific night when I almost broke completely. I had cooked his favorite meal, hoping maybe he would smile, maybe he would say thank you. Instead, he sat down, looked at the food, and pushed the plate away. "You can't do anything right," he spat. "Even your love tastes bitter." I froze. I wanted to scream, to throw the food at the wall, to run, but I didn't. I sat there in silence, swallowing not just the food, but the humiliation. That's how deep the control went. I couldn't even defend myself anymore. I began to live in constant fear. Fear of saying the wrong thing. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of being unloved forever. That fear was my invisible prison, the cage he built around me with words sharper than knives. And shame locked the doors. I was too ashamed to admit the truth to anyone. To the outside world, I pretended I was fine. I smiled in photos. I posted happy moments on social media. While inside, I was dying. That double life, the appearance of happiness versus the reality of trauma, is something only survivors of narcissist abuse truly understand. The betrayal was not only in his affairs, but in the way he betrayed my trust daily. He promised me stability, but gave me chaos. He promised me love, but gave me humiliation. He promised me honesty, but gave me lies and manipulation. And yet, every time he broke me, he always found a way to make me stay. He would kneel, cry, say, "I can't live without you." And because I was already drowning, I clung to those false words as if they were lifelines. There was one birthday I'll never forget. I had planned a small dinner, invited my sister, bought a cake. He didn't show up. Hours passed. The candles melted. My sister left. At midnight, he walked in, smelling of alcohol and perfume, with lipstick smeared on his collar. I asked where he had been, my voice trembling. He looked at me and said, "Who would want to spend time with you on your birthday? You're pathetic." Then he went to bed, leaving me standing there with tears falling on a cake no one ate. That night, something inside me died. That was the cruelest gift of all, the knowledge that my pain was entertainment to him. And still I stayed. I stayed because leaving felt impossible. I stayed because he convinced me that no one else would love me. I stayed because I was terrified of being alone. That is what living with a narcissist does. It chains you with fear and shame, until escape feels more dangerous than the abuse itself. Sometimes, when I think back to those years, I wonder if anyone could have saved me. But the truth is, I had to save myself. No one could see the bruises on my soul. No one knew I was trapped by a narcissist, drowning in an emotional abuse story that seemed endless. And when you're in that place, survival feels like the only goal. You don't dream of freedom. You dream of making it through the day without collapsing. And that's what I did. I survived each day. I survived each insult. I survived each betrayal. But survival came at a cost. The cost of myself. And reclaiming that self has been the hardest journey of all. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being trapped by a narcissist. It is not the tiredness of work or the weariness of long days. It is a bone-deep exhaustion, a constant heaviness in your chest from living in fear, humiliation, and manipulation. Every day felt like a battlefield, and I never knew which version of him I would meet. Would it be the charming man who pretended to love me, or the cruel abuser who thrived on my pain? The uncertainty was its own kind of torture. I began to live in fragments. A fragment of me still hoped for love. A fragment wanted to scream and run. A fragment wanted to die, just to escape the cycle. This is what psychological abuse does. It breaks you into pieces until you don't know which part of you is real anymore. My narcissist relationship story is not just about betrayal and lies, but about the way narcissist control destroyed my identity piece by piece. One of his favorite tactics was comparison. He often told me about other women, ex-girlfriends, co-workers, strangers. "She's more beautiful than you. She knows how to keep a man. You'll never be like her." These words became daggers, cutting into my self-esteem until there was nothing left. Sometimes he would flirt openly in front of me, then laugh when I reacted. "You're so insecure," he would sneer. "That's why no one could ever really love you." That was another form of humiliation, another way to remind me that I was replaceable, worthless. There was one night when I caught him texting another woman at 2 a.m. I gathered all my courage and asked, "Why are you doing this to me?" He looked at me with cold amusement and said, "Because I can. Because you'll never leave." And he was right. I didn't leave. I sat there crying in silence while he continued typing. That's the invisible prison of narcissist abuse. You're so broken that even when the truth is right in front of you, you feel powerless to escape. My body began to carry the weight of the trauma. I stopped sleeping. My hair started to fall out in clumps. My hands shook all the time. Friends noticed, but I brushed it off. "I'm just stressed," I told them. But the truth was, I was crumbling. Emotional abuse doesn't just destroy your heart. It seeps into your body, into your bones, until every part of you carries the scars. He knew how to twist everything into my fault. If he cheated, it was because I didn't satisfy him. If he screamed, it was because I provoked him. If he ignored me, it was because I was too needy. There was no reality except his reality. That is the power of narcissist manipulation. It steals your truth and replaces it with lies that you accept as fact. I remember another moment of brutal humiliation. We were at a wedding, surrounded by couples dancing. I reached for his hand, desperate for one small gesture of love. He pulled his hand away and whispered, "Don't embarrass me. You're not worthy of attention." My heart sank, but I forced a smile so no one would see the pain. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror, wondering how much longer I could survive this toxic love. And still, I stayed. Fear and shame held me like chains. Fear that he would ruin me if I left. Fear that no one would believe me. Shame that I had allowed it to go on for so long. Shame that I had lost myself so completely. I stayed because I thought leaving would prove him right, that I was nothing without him. That is the deepest wound of narcissist abuse. He convinced me I was worthless, and I believed him. There were days when I fantasized about running away, about packing a bag and disappearing. But then his words echoed in my head. "You'll never survive alone. No one will want you." Those words replayed until they felt like truth. I stayed in that invisible prison, trapped by trauma bonds, addicted to the cycle of abuse. Even the small crumbs of affection he occasionally threw at me felt like oxygen, keeping me alive just enough to keep enduring the pain. Living with a narcissist meant living without safety. I never knew if the next word would be an insult, the next day a betrayal, the next night a storm of silence. I walked on eggshells constantly, terrified of making the wrong move. That kind of fear doesn't just stay in the home. It follows you everywhere. I carried it to work, to the grocery store, even in conversations with strangers. It became my second skin. And yet, somewhere inside, a small voice still whispered that I deserved more. A fragile part of me, buried under years of humiliation and manipulation, refused to die. That part of me clung to survival, even when everything else wanted to give up. Maybe that was my hope. Not a loud hope, not a strong one, but a quiet whisper in the dark saying, "Laura, don't disappear completely." That whisper kept me alive. But at that point, I was not living. I was surviving. And surviving inside a narcissist relationship is a kind of hell that words can barely describe. There came a moment when I realized I was no longer living. I was only existing. My days blurred into one another. His insults, his silence, his betrayal. I woke up every morning with a knot in my stomach, bracing myself for the next round of humiliation. Nights were worse. I lay in bed listening to his breathing and felt like I was suffocating inside an invisible prison. I didn't even cry anymore. I felt too numb, too drained. That's what narcissist abuse does. It strips you of even your tears. The cycle of manipulation was endless. He would betray me, deny it, make me believe I was crazy, then offer a small crumb of affection just enough to keep me tied. It was a toxic love trap, one I couldn't escape. I told myself I stayed because I loved him, but deep down, I knew it wasn't love. It was fear. Fear and shame. Fear that no one else would ever want me. shame that I had allowed myself to be destroyed. That is the prison of living with a narcissist. You become addicted to the pain, convinced it's all you deserve. I can still remember one of the last conversations we had. I told him, "I can't take this anymore. You're breaking me." He looked me in the eyes and said coldly, "That's what you were made for, to be broken." Those words carved themselves into my soul. They were the purest expression of his control, his enjoyment of my suffering. It wasn't love, it was domination. And in that moment, a part of me finally saw the truth with terrifying clarity. And yet, I didn't walk away right then. I wish I could say I did, but I didn't. That's the reality of narcissist relationships. You don't just leave. You hesitate. You hope. You bargain with yourself. You tell yourself maybe tomorrow will be different. But tomorrow is always worse. The worst part was how small I had become. I used to be full of dreams, full of light. I wanted to travel, to laugh, to build a life filled with love. By the time he was done with me, I didn't even recognize myself. I avoided mirrors, I avoided people, I avoided joy. He had taken everything from me except the faintest spark of survival. That was his greatest victory, and my greatest shame. But survival is still something. Survival means I am here to tell this story. My narcissist confession is not a story of triumph. Not yet. It is a story of pain, of trauma, of being trapped by a narcissist who thrived on my destruction. It is a story of lies and betrayal, of isolation, of humiliation that cut me to the bone. It is a story of fear and shame that held me hostage for 3 long years. Sometimes, when I think back, I still hear his voice. "You're worthless. No one else will ever love you. You're too sensitive." Those words echo like ghosts. They follow me into quiet moments, into dreams, into silence. Healing is not a straight path. It is not as simple as leaving and forgetting. The damage of narcissist abuse lingers, like invisible scars that never fade completely. But there is something else too. A whisper inside me that says, "You're still here." That whisper is small, but it is mine. It is the part of me that survived when everything else was destroyed. It is the part that tells me maybe, just maybe, I am more than what he made me believe. I don't want to give the illusion of a happy ending. There isn't one. Not yet. I still wake up some nights with fear in my chest. I still question my worth. I still carry the shame of what I endured. But I also carry truth. The truth that he didn't love me. The truth that I was trapped, manipulated, humiliated. The truth that survival is, in itself, a form of rebellion. My name is Laura. I'm 34 years old. And for 3 years, I lived in the prison of a narcissist relationship. I was broken, humiliated, betrayed, and silenced. This is my narcissist true story, my emotional abuse story, my confession. He only loved me when I was broken, but I don't want to be broken anymore. And maybe that's where my story really begins. Not in healing completely, not in pretending the scars don't exist, but in saying out loud what I once could not. I was trapped by a narcissist, and I survived.